Very good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone is enjoying everything that this XPANSE gathering has to offer. We're crossing beyond the equator, and still we have a very interesting theme for the discussion happening today here. We're going to address the very idea of how to bring ideas to commercialization. And it seems to be a bit of an overarching cliche question, but there are many underlying streams of experiences and thoughts to discuss. And to do so, and now while we feel the warmth of this fireside conversation, the warmth of the spotlight, and this stellar set of speakers, we are pleased and privileged, I was saying, to count here today with us three distinguished speakers. They are very different among themselves. They share that they have been very seasoned entrepreneurs, serial and parallel entrepreneurs. I'm glad to introduce you to William Carbone, who has as a background both aerospace and electronics, but then he has now activities both in Helsinki, in Orange County, in Italy, etc. And currently he's the CEO of Evalify. They're about to introduce themselves in a second. We also welcome Sahil Arora, who's a director at TKS. He has a background in business and finance and psychology, and now he's into well-being of entrepreneurs, amongst many other things. And then we're also privileged to have Jepson Taylor coming from Utah, who's the CEO and founder of VEOX. They'll share the mysteries of success, but they also committed to me to try to confess the difficulties of failing and how to recover. I would like all of you to just introduce yourselves and the angle you represent in this discussion today. William.
Yeah. Thank you, Eduard. Hi, everyone. William here, and CEO of Evalify. What should I say about myself? Just anything, okay. I'm a passionate musician, so I like to play the piano. I run a company in Italy called Evagel. We are responsible for making wildfires suppression better and more efficient. And the company that I have in California called Evalify is about AI meets IP, meets VC industry. And currently live in Lisbon. And it's great to be here today.
Thanks a lot. Sahil?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Good evening. Thanks so much for having me. As Edward mentioned, my name is Sahil. I'm currently the director of TKS, the Knowledge Society. We run a 10-month-long program focused on empowering high school students with information and access to emerging sciences and technologies. So a bunch of us are in the audience today, so big shout out to the students. Prior to TKS, my background was in finance and business, and I've also done a master's in psychology, ran a direct-to-consumer mindfulness and well-being company focused on entrepreneurs throughout COVID. So really excited to be here with you, and thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jepson.
Jepson Taylor, I think two things I'll share about me that maybe aren't that known. When I was 16, I had a snowboard sponsor. When I went to college, I was intentionally homeless in the snow. And I think the theme there is I'm addicted to challenges. So there's always a challenge, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual. I've worked in a lot of different industries, semiconductor, quant finance, HR tech. And then I was the chief AI strategist for DataRobot and Dataiku, and I sold my company to DataRobot.
This is absolutely interesting. So I think that we have the components for a thriving conversation. It might be that we can trigger the discussion by talking about how to scale up an initiative, an endeavor. To bring an idea to commercialization, you need to scale up. I mean, the myth is that you need to scale up the funds, and you need to do so. You need to scale up also the market reach, and you need to do so. But it's a bit of a mystery to scale up the team. I know that all of you have been undergoing initiatives that have had tens or hundreds or perhaps thousands of employees and people around. So how do you scale up the size? How do you articulate the team? How are the functions distributed? I guess that this is a difficult thing. So would you like to, any of you, all of you, comment on how to scale up and organize a team of individuals?
I can start with, so DataRobot, we had 1,500 people and had a great culture, lots of really talented people there, but it's challenging. When you get to a bigger company, there's some sad stats. I don't know if this is real science, but some people have said 10% of the employees actually deliver the real value. So what are the other 90% doing? So if you think about that with sales, you have your president club, you have people that are exceeding quota, and then you have the bottom half where they're barely meeting it. So it's really challenging to, I think the thing I'll add to this is talent is like gravity. So if you have a really good talent, it's easier to keep talent. If you start to lose talent, I've seen the opposite, where a key engineer leaves and there's desperation. People are texting, so-and-so left. So there's a pecking order of, I like to think of that, talent as gravity. So create a gravity center and you can keep talent. But if you start to lose it, then it's really dangerous.
Outstanding. Any other reflections there?
Sure. So from my experience, I think when it comes to hiring, there's different stages and when you're hiring, who you're hiring, what you're hiring them for. And one of the biggest learnings that I had was when the roles are, let's say, unclear and the company is pivoting a lot, it's changing, it's growing, you really want to find individuals that are able to adapt and evolve and be flexible, knowing that what they might be doing might change over time. And then as the company scales and as you have more fixed role clarity and you know what you need from someone, then you can also hire people that are specialists in those particular roles. But I think in the earlier stages, having that degree of flexibility or at least role clarity is essential to really be able to bring in someone so they feel empowered and clear about what they're doing. And certainly with my startup, that was one of our learnings and challenges in finding perhaps the right person at the right time for a well-defined role.
Very interesting. I'm keen to know what William thinks about this.
Yeah, sure. I think it's also the responsibility of an entrepreneur. I know it's maybe something people think about the later stage, but it's always the culture. So start with the why you're doing that, and you have a much more consensus to attract a bigger amount of talent, but also different types of talents are important at the very beginning. You don't need a super heavy expert on a topic. You might want somebody who can upgrade their knowledge and be a great teamwork, because it's like a really long marriage, and somebody who has a high emotional intelligence. These are really important traits if you're setting up a team, especially at the beginning.
Absolutely interesting. You say, I'm going to improvise and derail from the questions that we agreed upon, if I may, so that this is a true Socratic conversation. No, you said something exceptionally interesting, talking about talent. I was just humbly asking about how to combine the talents, but how to measure talent. Is talent something that's quantifiable? Do you have metrics for talent? Some wise people say that it's a bit like happiness or love. Once you experience it, you know that there is, but it's very elusive to define and to measure, while it isn't indispensable. So what's talent, what's excellent talent, what's exceptional talent, what's top-notch talent, 5 Sigma talent. So let's talk about talent for a sense. How that is important to bring data to commercialization. Any one of you?
So one point I want to share with the last question, new startups should not hire junior talent, hire senior talent, right stages. About this question about how do you measure talent, this is a very basic scale, but I think it's meaningful. You have normal, curious, passionate, and obsessed. So you're desperate to hire obsessed, because obsessed will get it done. And as an entrepreneur, you need it to be done. And you don't have time to babysit, you don't have time to mentor. So most people I know that are hiring, they're always looking for obsession, and they try to tease that out in the interview.
Very interesting. Within the question arises, are you monomaniacally obsessed in something, or do you need to be obsessed in many things? You're a polymath. You were playing the piano yesterday. All of you are polymaths. So where is the focus of the obsession? But that will be another question.
Innovation is tied, your confidence in innovation goes up if people have been successful in multiple industries. So if you've been very successful in one industry, I have low confidence that you might be very successful in a different industry.
Very interesting. Talent then. Sahil.
Sure, yeah. So it's an interesting perspective, and as you asked the question, my initial thought was, talent is also relative to the role that you're talking about, and talent might mean something different for a different responsibility or role. And I've shared this with the TKS students before, but from my perspective, one thing that defines talent is how quickly is someone able to learn and grow. Right? That to me is a unifying skill to be able to actually adapt to new information and situations. And if you're able to find those individuals that are perhaps obsessed with growing, then regardless of where the company goes and as it pivots, and again, my perspective is a bit more, let's say, earlier to mid-stage. Perhaps in a late-stage company, you do want those specialized people that don't have to grow in the same way. But in the earlier stages, having that flexibility to be able to adapt and learn quickly is how I would define talent then.
That's very interesting. You're bringing the educational or the experiential angle. So which experiences you need to undergo to develop a given talent once you define the talent that's valuable for a company? That's interesting. William, on talent?
I think also the company is made not of a single idea. So the talent is also, I feel like you can have an ensemble of ideas that come together. So if somebody's capable of contributing with those ideas to your initial idea. Because the last part, the successful company is the combination of different ideas together. So the same is a talent. And different people, different organizations have a different, from corporates to startups have a different conception of talent. Sometimes it's very subjective. Also, success itself is very subjective. So we are going from a society that has always to close the gap. So let's say we have this kind of financial, success. Otherwise, we're not successful. And it's always like about closing the gap instead of creating infinity games.
Yeah.
So I'm more for the infinity games more than closing the gap.
Splendid. I think that naturally we can gravitate from the team, irrespective of its size, to the individual, particularly the thought leaders, the CEOs, the founders, which is you. So can we talk about the traits, the attributes that define a good leader in bringing an idea to commercialization, which is perhaps the definition of a success in a startup? Are there, related to that, are there any bounds? Because are there mental bounds? Are they stamina or physiological bounds? Are they psychological bounds? Are they institutional bounds, disciplinary bounds? So I know that you would like to define the good attributes, that's what I'm asking, but I also ask in turn, are there bounds to those attributes? Any one of you?
Sure, I can go first. From my perspective, again, I take a much more focus on relational approaches. And so when I think about the skills that are necessary to be a great entrepreneur or leader, for me, it starts with how do you build trust? How do you inspire the people around you to be bought into what it is you're striving for? And that might be rooted in empathy. It might be rooted in being a great listener or communication skills, and really being able to present information in a way that's accessible to the many people that you need to inspire to follow you on this particular journey. And I think that also then translates to being great at building external relationships. So whether it's through partnerships or sales, again, how do you present yourself in a way that's authentic and understands where the individual that you're trying to collaborate with might be coming from? Yeah. Now, going beyond that, when I think beyond, let's say, the interpersonal to the intrapersonal, to me, growth is still one of the core components, right? Going back to talent. So how can you as an individual learn from your own experiences, continue to adapt as you're acquiring new information? And then also critical thinking, right? How do you actually bring together all of these different perspectives to evaluate how you're going to move forward in a way that's meaningful and leads to the results that you're aspiring for? Right. And I'll add one more detail, going back to our conversation from before the session. I also believe that to be a great leader, you have to be able to practice some degree of detachment from what it is you're doing and from the outcome that you're striving for, right? I think if someone becomes overly fused with the outcome that they're pursuing, then it really limits their ability to perceive the situation for what it is and then adapt to it again in a way that helps make the best decision and not a decision that you were attached to making prior to having all the information.
Do you mean emotionally attached? I mean, you still are responsible for things and even liable for things, but you think there is a sweet spot of responsibility versus detachment on your endeavor? That's interesting. Any other reflection angle?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel like as a founder, it's a responsibility. We don't talk much about that. We have has this myth of if you don't have at least 2 breakdowns, you're not a good founder, right? And I want to demystify that. It's super dangerous. Your life will not be the same again. And I feel like it's a responsibility, not only as a human, but especially as a founder. You're talking about what the responsibility that as a founder have. It's to make mental health and well-being a priority in your life. And also this will help you to increase capacity in order to, to face all those bigger challenges that you inevitably will have. And believe me, if you have an idea to commercialization, you're probably going to be doing something really innovative that nobody else has done. So you have no even somebody to help you with sometimes. And you're always or often on your own as an entrepreneur or a founder, and a lot of time you're on your own. You make the decision on your own at the end. And increasing that capacity within you and connecting to yourself, that's actually the most important thing you can do. And then of course, all the rest, discipline and empathy and all the rest comes well. But this is the ABC of a founder to me.
I'm going to be a bit critical, not very heretical. you talk about yourself as founders who really are living these initiatives, but what about the team? If it's 10, 100, or 15,000, are you responsible? What about the mental health of whomever will need to live the initiative because it's not successful? So are you? This is a bit social, but you also feel responsible about your colleagues. Anyhow.
A startup was 100 times harder than I thought it was going to be. And I think, and I was coming into it with a lot of arrogance because I had worked in these different industries with success. And so for someone in the room, let's just assume someone here is the smartest person on the planet, pick a category. I would actually assume that if they haven't done a startup, they're idiots when it comes to marketing, sales, product. Like there's so many other things. And so I came into it with a lot of arrogance and really got my butt kicked. But I think the biggest thing is other founders. The network of, I like to say, founders are my brothers and sisters, even if we're competitors, because very few people understand the daily pit in the stomach and how to deal with it. But it's one of the best places to grow and develop. So if you think of yourself turning in an assignment for school, you might get an F. In startup land, you have to turn in the assignment and you might be sued. You might be destroyed. And so you have innovation from desperation, which is not healthy, but it comes up occasionally. If it's coming up all the time, that's a pattern. That's a bad thing.
It's very interesting. So, So there is a bit of a density of vanity in the innovation ecosystems, but the three of you talk about transcending your ego and going more from ecosystems to ecosystems and caring about others, even if you compete commercially or as an enterprise. There needs to be a balance between competition and cooperation. Can we discuss about that? It was not on the list, but I'm trying to improvise other angles.
I want to add that a good day for the ego is a bad day for the soul.
There you go.
Start from there. And actually, especially in this kind of community, you want to have your competitors be collaborators, and that's how you create this kind of win-win solutions. Even sharing employees sometimes. You send an employee to better organization. So I do feel like if we would have this kind of mentality instead of killing each other on the battlefield, then it would be easier to make a business, would be easier to create more organic companies that will grow, okay, slower, but then would be, let's say, easier for everyone.
Very interesting. Let's take 3 or 4 minutes on lights and shadows, on what really does it take to have a successful idea to commercialization, and confess some of your failures and how to circumvent them in the future. And then I plan to open a round of questions to the audience, so be ready. So again, we were discussing before that sometimes startups do overdo technology. So is the idea originally coming from a brand new scientific concept, a new technology? Should it be an idea as a product, as a need? So where does the market and the user come into play? Is it the tension from the technology push to the application pull? Can we navigate that discussion? Any thoughts there?
So I've been in AI for a long time, and sometimes in AI there's a temptation for, I call it tech flexing. So you're going into a conversation, you try to lean into some technology aspects, and I think what I have learned is no one cares. So the people that are buying the software, they care about the impact, and so don't sell software, sell promotions. For people in the audience that are technical, that cares, because technical, I call them technophiles, they care so much about what they built, they want to share it. And I like to just exaggerate and say, let's pretend aliens gave this to you. How are you going to sell this? No one cares about, because often if you get into the details, there's jargon and you're completely losing the audience. And so I've definitely learned that the hard way. Sales can be incredibly efficient, but it's often focused on outcomes that they were already familiar with before you showed up.
Yeah. Very interesting. I agree that the intricacy of the inner workings of the technology doesn't matter, but what the technology provides, it does matter. It's part of the value, I guess. Anyhow, any other thoughts in this domain?
I'll piggyback on what Jepson shared. So, in terms of not necessarily how it works, but like what does it do, right? Talking about the value proposition of it. And again, we were talking beforehand, there's often so many things that people build, they get attached to, the particular intricacies of what they've built, but they haven't positioned it in such a way that it actually resonates with the people that they're selling it to. And as a result, it doesn't get to commercialization inversely, sometimes people haven't actually built anything that meaningful, but they've understood the problem and able to communicate in such a way that they have the opportunity to then commercialize it and improve it iteratively along the way. And so I think it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, like overly investing in technology and building versus investing in time and energy to understand who you're selling to, how it's going to help them, and positioning in such a way that it makes it easy for them to say yes.
Yeah, interesting. Any other thought?
No, as part of the confession, right?
Let's trigger the convention then. On the confession side, again, please, anything that you were close to failure mentally, commercially, technologically, just let's share failure.
Yeah, you're always on the verge, right? So what I learned is that the limits of the startup are the limits of the founders. So in the process, I realized that I had to get better at asking for help, because you can't do it alone. Like, I came from a corporate environment where, you have an assistant, you have everything, and you've been thrown into an environment where you have to take care about invoices and presentations, details of the website, like anything, like coffee machines.
This is very interesting. I don't know whether we will end up writing the Abu Dhabi manifesto on how to take ideas to commercialization, but at least we see that you are humans and that we need to rehumanize your entrepreneurial activities. Any other confession you would like to make?
Sure. I mean, I know we were talking about this beforehand. So in my case, I think with the startup that I was running, a lot of the challenges were interpersonal in nature. And I think navigating those differences as the company is growing is one of the hardest things to do, because keeping people who have different values and interests aligned towards a particular goal in a way that they feel motivated to go after it is an inherent challenge. And part of that is on the founder or the entrepreneurs to really get clear on how they're communicating to their teams what's important here. And at the same time, I'll go back to detachment. It's also on recognizing what limits you have that you can control versus what is the other person or your team members' responsibilities to try and lean into. And I think surrounding yourself with people that take that personal responsibility, they don't come up with excuses, but they say, okay, here's what I can do differently, here's how I intend to operate in a different way going forward, is what creates resilience as a team, as an individual.
You reinforce the very notion of detachment. Is something you can be trained upon? Is it an intellectual trait? Is something that can become unconscious? So how do you reach that?
Sure.
Is it a deliberate thing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think attachment to anything is associated with how you perceive yourself and what your identity is. And so anything that has to do with mindfulness or cultivating self-awareness leads to recognizing, again, where that separation exists, right? Where it's not a definition of who you are, but it's what you might be experiencing in that moment. It doesn't necessarily extend to defining, again, that identity.
Very interesting.
And that's really what I mean when
Very interesting. Fair enough. Jepson?
Vulnerability, what to share. So I think 90% of acquisitions are failures. They are failures to the entrepreneur. They're devastating. They didn't want to sell. They had to sell. And to give you a glimpse into the nightmare of a startup, so two memories. During the week of Christmas, which is important in the U.S., I'm polyphasic sleeping. I come home and watch the kids open presents, and I go back to work. Polyphasic sleeping, if you're not familiar, you can abandon all core sleep. You can survive on 2 hours of cumulative sleep. Every 4 hours, you take a 20-minute nap.
For how long?
20-minute nap every 4 hours, sustained.
But for weeks?
You can do that. Some people have done it for years. So I'm doing that, and then the other memory I had, I think we had an aunt that died, and my wife asked me, are you afraid of death? And I said, absolutely not. But the energy that I said was kind of odd. And I was never suicidal, but she asked me, explain this. And I said, at least I would get a break. And it doesn't mean I want a break from my family, but it shows the nightmare, because any employee can quit. You hate your job, you should have quit earlier. No one's just saying a bad job, quit. But when you're a founder, you've raised capital, you have commits to customers who you care about, you have commits to investors. You have to see it through.
Thank you for your very genuine honesty on these aspects. There's 2 minutes of glory. I'm sure that the audience is eager to ask questions to the panelists. I have one over there, one over there. Would you please go, madam?
Okay, so I wanted to ask, what are the steps and considerations that are involved in bringing an innovative idea to the market? And how do you face the challenges of the market fit and the funding?
She hears from me all the time, so I'm going to defer to you two.
I might speak to the steps quickly. So the steps, I'm a big fan of the lean startup. So see if you can sell your idea before you build it. Even in like a PowerPoint, 3 images, just go around, have conversations, and see if you can get someone to commit to buying the idea. You don't have to quit your job to do that.
Very interesting. 25 seconds of glory. 24, 23, you go. Question? You shut out, yeah? 20 seconds. 15 seconds. I'm joking.
You already spoke about the topic of my question. The question is, what is the best leadership recipe for the founder? Jepson, you said during the interview you should mention that you should initially go with obsessed talent, and you should mention that you don't have time to babysit a mentor. At the end, which is the best recipe? Should a founder take also the time to mentor in the leadership plan? Is it depend on the stage of the startup? What's the best way to lead the team?
Very difficult question. Best kept secret. 5 seconds. Anyone?
A quick word from Jepson.
CEO is a chief storyteller, so you inspire the troops to come and join your crazy journey, but you have to have one goal, and you don't have time to mentor anyone in the early stage.
Very loud, very clear. With that, I would like to close the discussion. Thank everyone and the others, particularly the panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.